I am seated in an office surrounded by heads and bodies. This is the opening line of David Foster Wallace's Infinite Jest. This novel boils down to just this: heads and bodies. Shortly into this opening scene of Infinite Jest, which is actually at the chronological end of the work, Hal A. Candenza is being half Nelson to the fore and strapped to a gurney. Tangled and unspecified in the progression of Hal's storyline, he has lost the ability to communicate beyond, quote, sub-animalistic croaks that sound like butter being hit by a hammer. These noises are so horrific that people respond with violence. When he tries to talk, what comes out of his mouth is apparently quite different than what he intended. The causation of this detached state of Hal remains unclear. There are hints in the book that might indicate drugs, DMZ, but I don't buy these theories. What is clear is that despite Hal's supreme lucidity of mind, he has also lost the ability to experience without thinking about thinking. In Hal's darkest monologue towards the end of the book, he writes, I experienced vividly the image of a broad, cool, well-lit room piled floor to ceiling with nothing but the lightly buttered chicken fillets I was going to consume over the next 60 years. The number of fowl vivisected for a lifetime's meat. I had to put my hand out against the wall until the worst of it passed. Hal sees everything at once. He sees his entire future and everything it promises to disappoint, and it nearly kills him. In The Pale King, David Foster Wallace's final work cut short by his suicide, he describes the futility of too much introspection. Quote, in an intentional bout of major concentrated thinking, where you sit down with the conscious intention of confronting major questions like, am I currently happy? Or, what ultimately do I really care about and believe in? The questions often end up not so much answered, but more like beaten to death, so attacked from every angle, and each angle's different objections and complications, that they end up even more abstract and ultimately meaningless than when you started. This introspection is the indescribable thing that makes waiting rooms and long drives hell for a lot of people. This type of thinking. Because you aren't just sitting in a waiting room or in a car anymore, but living and reliving 3 dozen outcomes in lifetimes before lunch. The issue is this. Most of life is fluorescently lit, boring, and probably unimportant. One breath at a time, but who can breathe a whole room full of air? There's this Zen practice where you're supposed to stare at a blank wall. Whatever the emotion one feels, however strong, unpleasant, or violent, one remains motionless, facing that wall. If you ever visit a shrink, they'll probably try to tell you to practice something like this. The discipline comes from literally facing the present, slowing down and acknowledging how you feel. I have my own morbidly bizarre fear of unoccupied places. Empty places with nothing to do in them but to think. Summer days when the dry air clicks through the vents. Being, not doing. Lonely on my own. It's easy to think incessantly about what others are thinking about you. How you appear to others in the voyeuristic third person. Which of your profiles is more pleasing to others? Fear of the present drives the need for distraction because the mind demands entertainment, escape. And no, it's not just millennials who can't cope with the present. Fear of the present and sitting with the moment has been driving people to drugs, sex, television, work, gambling, what have you, for as long as there has been a present to avoid. This avoidance often puts us into our ironic caricature roles, into our minds and out of our bodies. David Foster Wallace writes extensively on postmodern entertainment. Contemporary entertainment has floundered away from its more sincere roots. The camera's power to capture and relay the everyday, relatable human experience has turned self-referential, cynical, and ironic. I asked my brother for a quick definition of postmodern entertainment. Vapid, ironic, reactionary to another movement, does not exist without another movement. The title of David Foster Wallace's essay, and I don't really know how to pronounce this, but E unibus plurum, means from one, many, and it's a play on the American motto E plurinis unum, which means out of many, one. This is written on the back of every U.S. currency. He argues that fiction writers, such as himself, tend to be oglers. They tend to lurk as they stare emptily at the surrounding present. The essence of the essay is that entertainment turns people into oglers, into fiction, into third-person narrations. Yes, that is Tobey Maguire in The Great Gatsby. Shows reference themselves. Just watch Rick and Morty. The show subtly references its own episodes and repetitiously breaks the third wall to mention the fact that it is, in fact, a TV show. There's something hilariously original and charming about this, time and time again. One ceases to be staring at a piece of furniture. These jokes seem smart. Pointing at one's own hilarity and inhumanness distances one from the ugly. Actors in sitcoms no longer pretend to act as an unwatched human being, but as someone fully aware of the camera and in on the hilarity of the setup. This seems to make television far more palatable. The lies a mind tells itself about its body, or its actual self, if you will, draws this caricature. We make people who we want them to be, especially ourselves. Irony is the displacement between what a personage pretends to be and what a person actually is. It's that disconnected mind watching that caricature body have sex, watch television, smoke pot, not actually participating in the event. This is self-voyeurism in the creepiest sense. The boring, embarrassingly human aspects of life that this personality must avoid may measure this displacement, but ultimately this insidious denial of self adds up. The tab will be paid if one chooses to face down the inherent humanness of existence. It will probably be uncomfortable. I guess my point is this. Life is unbearable in the introspective third person. Constant consideration of how the self appears to others turns life into a spectator sport where the mind is now disconnected from your own body. To reference DFW one more time, this is like sex for someone who has watched too much porn. That kid is not actually able to have sex anymore, only imagine what he looks like as he has sex, like in the videos. And this maybe is the graphic consequence of too much entertainment. A person can only watch themselves interact with others, like in a sitcom. You are overanalyzing yourself through some distorted, cracked, and refracted splinter of light. The good news is, the way one thinks about themselves is usually falsified through over-evaluation. Maybe the answer is some Zen practice of staring at a wall. For me, though, lucidity of experience comes when I'm skateboarding. When I'm a little bit drunk, tearing down campus on tiny wheels, avoiding cars, ducking chains. And especially in that indescribable moment when my wheels lose friction in the perpendicular, and I'm sliding out in two different vectors, the magnitude of which can only be described as fucking weightless. My legs feel like my legs again. I am back in my body.